superheroes with not-so-super first-time video game appearances. Hey, Chris Baker here. And if you're like me, one bit of trivia you always love learning about with superheroes is their first comic book appearances. Action Comics number 1, Amazing Fantasy number 15, Detective Comics number 27, Marvel Tales number 1. You know I'm always going to give Spider-Ham some love, right? But what about their first video game appearances? Sure, you know that Doctor Strange first appeared in Strange Tales number 110, but are you aware that he first appeared digitally in one screen of a 1984 graphic adventure called Quest Probe featuring the Hulk? Ultron showed up there for the first time too. And by now everyone knows that Deadpool cracked his first joke in the pages of 1992's New Mutants number 98. But it was another 13 years as an unlockable character in X-Men Legends 2 before his fourth wall breaking antics would extend to video games. Sadly, not all characters' gaming debuts come anywhere near matching the importance of their first appearances in comics. On that note, let's count down the dozen least superheroic first video game appearances of iconic superheroes now, shall we? For Reed and Sue Richards of the Fantastic Four, you know them better as Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, actually appearing as team-up characters in the 16-bit Spider-Man game born from the 90s animated series isn't so bad in and of itself, even if it is pretty easy to play the whole thing without even finding them. It's the fact that it took 12 years of Marvel video games before Marvel's first family was fully represented in the medium. Reed and Sue even had a legitimate shot at acknowledgement in the 1985 graphic adventure called Quest Probe starring Human Torch and the Thing, but were totally snubbed. For whatever reason, Spider-Man's obscure foes in the Circus of Terror managed to make their second game appearance here, and we even see the Blob from the X-Men protecting Castle Doom, oddly. But Reed and Sue? Sorry, you two. We wouldn't get playable versions of the first ever married Marvel heroes until Acclaim's 1997 Fantastic Four PlayStation game. And, well, just enjoy the music from it, will you? Appropriately, number 11 is 1980 star quarterback Jim Everett, who wore that very number for the Los Angeles Rams, because I'm pretty sure that's who's starring in this game. Oh, it's not? This is Judge Dredd for Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum in 1987? Does that look anything like something Sylvester Stallone or Carl Urban would wear? Your goal for the game is to catch perps, taking out any cats, or rats, or whatever those are supposed to be, along the way. 'Cause you are the law, or something. Looks more like you should be handing off to Eric Dickerson. Marvel video games all started with Spider-Man, a title that's still shockingly playable as Atari 2600 releases go. But you know the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover? It applies to games too. Though Spider-Man's gameplay does respect the wall crawler as well as Atari's breakthrough gaming console might reasonably allow, Parker Brothers' cover art sure does fail to make our favorite Parker brother look very heroic. It's not often you'll see a superhero game where the titular character is clearly losing. As Spidey games specifically go, Edge of Time sort of conveys that, but that's more mood establishment than actively getting his butt kicked. But here, Norman Osborn is clearly getting the best of him. Then again, it is a pretty tough game, and you will plummet to your doom many times. I guess it's not so much an inaccurate cover as it is a humiliating one. What happens when one of the most cosmically powerful characters in Marvel history gets his own NES game? Does he just cosmically obliterate anything in his path like he should? No, not exactly.
Ducky, you're the one.
Silver Surfer is notoriously one of the hardest shooters on the NES, as anyone who has ever tried to make their way to the climactic battle with Mr. Sinister can attest. Yes, that Mr. Sinister. The X-Men enemy. The one who's never actually been in the same comic book issue as Norrin Radd to begin with. Minus the difficulty, there's the backbone of a fun game here. And it seems to be especially popular with fictional video game characters about to be murdered by mobsters.
This is it, Ed. You're going to be dead soon, and you never went skydiving. You never ate caviar, and you never beat the Silver Surfer game for the NES. You're gonna die with regrets, Edo. Oh, if only I'd spent more time learning how to escape from Trunks instead of learning the enemy attack patterns in the Silver Surfer for the NES. Although, honestly, I'm glad I spent so much time playing Silver Surfer for the NES. That game was tight.
Remember the Ultron shot I showed during the intro from the Quest Probe Hulk game? Did you see the birdcage to the right? You might notice Ant-Man is in there as Ultron's prisoner. One thing though, not only does holding Ant-Man as prisoner completely humiliate Hank Pym, it also doesn't take his powers into consideration. Why can't he just shrink a little bit tinier and slip through those bars? You can actually debate about what qualifies as Robin's first game appearance. Was it Ocean's Europe-only first Batman game ever, in which the manual says he was abducted by the Joker and the Riddler, but you never actually see him? Or the supervillains for that matter? Or perhaps the one that really counts is the first time he's visible in a game, as was the case with Data East's Batman the Caped Crusader. Whatever the case, there's no debating that being introduced as a worthless hero who's only there to be saved kinda sucks. Oh, and by the way, the first image of Robin we get isn't even Dick Grayson. It's Jason Todd. Dick wouldn't show up in a game until he appeared as a playable character in Batman the Animated Series for Game Boy, which was actually quite good. Meanwhile, Caped Crusader was released in 1988, the same year readers voted to kill Jason in the comics. And how do we know that's Jason and not Dick? Poetically enough, Batman tells us at Jason's grave. Back around the time DC took its first stab at a live-action TV show starring The Flash, THQ tried to join in the fun with a Game Boy game of its own. But just watch this a bit. Does this in any way say fastest man alive to you? Pressing the B button for Mario makes for a faster character. It's also worth noting that a second Flash Show-inspired game saw the light of day on the Sega Master System in markets like Europe and Brazil in 1993, long after the show was cancelled. It did a better job of making Barry Allen feel like a fast character, because you found yourself navigating into spikes and other annoying hazards a lot more quickly than you would have if you were going at normal speed. As far as gaming debut injustices go, you could do a lot worse than, well, Injustice: Gods Among Us. But for Lobo, it's not so much the actual game he first appeared in that ranks him so highly on this list, nor that he was a mere DLC character. It's not even that someone who calls himself the main man took until 2011 to make it into games in the first place. It's the fact that he was set to appear in his own games cancelled many years before. Yes, games. Plural. As a super-powered individual, it's one thing to have your own game cancelled once as a gaming debut. Such was the case with Green Lantern, Witchblade, and the Marvel 2099 universe, to name a few. But Lobo managed to blow that chance on two separate occasions. The first one, Lobo for Sega Genesis and Super NES, is actually available online as a full product if you look hard enough. I even saw this bootleg Repro Genesis cartridge at the Too Many Games Retro Gaming Convention. Good luck recognizing any other pastiches in this fighting game except for the main man himself though. The game was complete and even reviewed in Electronic Gaming Monthly and GamePro. Ocean likely pulled it at the last minute because it made Shaq Fu look like Street Fighter 2. in 1996, once the PlayStation, Saturn, N64 generation was in full swing. A few years later, at E3 2003, Japanese publisher Kemco announced a PS2 Xbox Lobo game. As an attendee at that convention myself as an editor for the official US PlayStation magazine, I distinctly remember seeing this one sheet and even a Lost to Time trailer at their booth, right next to Batman Dark Tomorrow, known by many as one of the worst superhero games of all time. Maybe it's for the best that we didn't get either one of these fraggin' Lobo games after all. For the full story on Thor's troubled history of getting any sort of respect in games in the 90s, see this video I posted shortly after Ragnarok came out. Spoiler alert, his now forgotten hammer brother Thunderstrike got most of the attention. Yeah, that's right, this guy. Thor Odinson's first actual appearance in a game was as an assist hero in the obscure arcade fighter called Avengers and Galactic Storm. And guess who literally stole Thor's thunder in that game as a fully playable character? That's right, Thunderstrike.
The winner! You're finished!
Thunderstrike as Thor was one of several heroes who had been turned into stone in Capcom's Marvel Superheroes. Their only role in the game was to be saved once Thanos was defeated. It marked the not-so-heroic debuts of Drax, Nova, She-Hulk, and Scarlet Witch, none of whom would see any sort of legitimate gaming representation for close to a decade. Daredevil's first gaming appearance is easily missed, but let's just take a moment to realize just how much is wrong about this single image, the extent of his cameo, from Spider-Man 2 for Game Boy. First, just look at him. Do you know for sure it's Daredevil? Outside of the horns, it'd be pretty tough to state conclusively that you're looking at Matt Murdock. Next, the grammar. I mean, I know it's just a word bubble, but poorly portrayed grammar translates to a poorly represented character. Hold on a sec, let's fix some things. Don't forget, kids, always put a comma in front of the name you are directly addressing. And speaking of commas, don't use them when you should be using a period. And why isn't there a space here? Oh, it must have wandered down a row. There, much better. Except that, well, the thing he's actually saying is even more important, no matter how newly perfect the grammar. This is an absolutely amazing assemblage of heroes that seems to have come together for no apparent reason. We never really see Daredevil team with Captain America, Human Torch, and Wolverine as one cohesive unit. And Matt seems delighted in speaking for everyone by basically saying, yeah, we're just gonna sit this one out. Mysterio isn't really that big of a threat. Don't go and die on us. Remember that random blob appearance in a Quest Probe game that I mentioned earlier? Outside of that, not even the slightest mention of anything related to the X-Men had been made in games until 1989, the release year for two subpar X-Men games. It's the 1-2 punch of disappointment for no less than 8 mutants appearing in both X-Men for PC and the infamous The Uncanny X-Men for NES that gives this hallowed top spot to Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler, Colossus, Emma Frost, Juggernaut, and Magneto. It wasn't until 2013 that anyone on the internet had claimed to play through the entire X-Men PC game, which is often referred to as Madness in Murder World. And for Austin here, it was done more out of a sense of determination than to enjoy the game he himself describes as awful. The game has some interesting ideas for puzzle solving, but that didn't make up for, well, what you're looking at. Later that year, it got worse. The Uncanny X-Men is widely regarded as one of the worst superhero games of all time, what with its muddy graphics, insane difficulty, and final Magneto level that required a secret code to access after you had earned your way there. Seriously. For me, it went back to Blockbuster on the very first night of my 3-evening rental. This is literally the first game I ever personally played where the phrase, "I don't like this," entered my head. So in that sense, I guess I can thank it for teaching me that games can be bad? Are there any other shameful first gaming appearances of other superheroes that I didn't mention here? Are there any particularly great ones that you think are worth noting? Let me know in the comments. And as always, don't forget to follow Spider-Ham's advice. I'll see you next time.